This sneaky ATM scam can drain your bank accounts in seconds.
Why is my account almost $1,000 less?
That happened to me.
That guy scammed me last night at the ATM machine.
I didn't think anything of it. I thought he was just using the ATM.
My initial reaction was, wait a second. I definitely did not withdraw that much money.
Investigator from Chase just made me feel so icky.
I tried so hard to get that money back.
And according to the FTC, people reported losing $10 billion to scams in 2023. That's like every person in America having $30 snatched from their wallet by criminals. If you don't know how to move in these streets, every ATM visit could be like leaving your wallet in a gas station bathroom. So I'll show you how 3 innocent people use an ATM to move a few bucks around, only to have a scammer drain their entire weekly paycheck. How one victim caught the scammer in the act, recorded the proof, and still had his claim denied by Chase. And if you get hit, the 7 battle-tested steps that can force your bank to cough up every stolen dollar. Oh, and before I forget, I put together a free checklist to help you lock down your identity and keep scammers out for good. It's super easy to follow and packed with quick steps with clickable links to secure your accounts, block payday loan fraud, protect your tax records, and even more. Plus, I even included over 10 agencies where you can report scams just like this. And I just created another freebie to help you remove yourself from data broker lists so those shady companies stop selling your personal info. Just click the link down below to grab both for free. Now, let's talk about how Joey lost $1,600. Joey wasn't expecting to lose his hard-earned money that day. He was just stopping by the ATM like he had done countless times before. But in a matter of minutes, he would unknowingly walk into a painful scam, one that nearly drained his entire account and left him fighting for weeks to get his money back. Joey pulled up, ready to withdraw some cash, but something wasn't right. The card reader wouldn't work. He tried inserting his card again, but nothing happened. That's when a helpful stranger standing nearby leaned in. They said something like, "Oh yeah, man, that's what happens a lot with this machine. You gotta tap to pay on your card. Just use that, it works every time." Joey hesitated for a second. He had never really used the tap feature at an ATM before, but this guy seemed to know what he was talking about. And besides, he was in a rush. So he tapped his phone, entered his PIN, took his cash, and then walked off, completely unaware that his session was still open. Now, hours later, Joey checked his bank account, and that's when panic set in. There were 6 withdrawals that he never made. $1,640 was gone. His stomach dropped. He scrolled through his transaction history over and over, hoping it was some mistake. But the numbers did not change. That's when he remembered the stranger at the ATM. He was set up. So Joey wasted no time. He immediately called Chase's fraud department, explaining his money had been stolen. But instead of getting the help he expected, he was met with resistance and disbelief. Chase's response was something like, "Sir, you tapped your phone to make the withdrawal, so it must have been you. You didn't report your phone missing, so there's no way someone else used it. They said, we reviewed your case, and unfortunately, we won't be refunding your money." Joey couldn't believe what he was hearing. How could they just dismiss it like that? He pleaded with them to check the ATM security footage, proof that he had left before the extra withdrawals happened. But Chase shut him down again. They said, "We can't pull the footage unless law enforcement requests it." Now, Joey wasn't about to let Chase brush this off, so he went back to the same ATM several times, hoping to spot something suspicious. And sure enough, after a few visits, there he was, the exact same helpful stranger who had told him to use tap to pay. They were standing right there at that same ATM, watching, waiting. Joey quickly pulled out his phone and started recording. He captured clear video footage of the scammer lingering near the machine, waiting for new victims. Now, armed with that new footage, Joey rushed back to Chase, confident that they would finally take his case seriously. But their response was another slap in the face. They said, "How do we know this was from the day that you were scammed? How do we know this wasn't just from some random guy at the ATM?" They basically said, "We're sorry, but we still won't be refunding your money." At this point, Joey was outraged. He took his case to the local news station. He shared his footage, his story, and how Chase refused to help him even with clear evidence. And then suddenly, things changed. After the media picked up the story and started asking Chase questions, the bank reopened Joey's fraud case. This time, they did what they should have done the first time. They reviewed the transactions and then refunded the stolen funds. And then there's Pamela, who lost almost $1,000. Pamela was just trying to withdraw some cash, $40 to be exact, from her local Chase Bank ATM. But what should have been a simple transaction turned into a nightmare, leaving her nearly $1,000 poorer and forcing her into a battle with her own bank to get her money back. Pamela approached the ATM on the right side of the machine, like she always does, ready to insert her debit card like usual. But when she slid the card in, nothing happened. No beep, no processing, just silence. Confused, she tried again, but still nothing. That's when she heard a voice beside her. A man waiting in line leaned in just slightly, not too close, just enough to seem helpful, but not pushy. They said something like, "Oh yeah, that's what happens all the time with these machines. You have one of those chip cards, right? Just tap it." Pamela hesitated for a second. She wasn't in the habit of using tap features at ATMs, but it was her bank, so she figured it would be fine. She tapped her card, and it worked. She entered her PIN, withdrew her $40, thanked the man for his advice, and then walked away. She had no idea she was handing over access to her entire account. Now that night, Pamela went about her usual routine, completely unaware that her account was still vulnerable. Then the next morning, she casually opened her Chase banking app, something that she did every so often just to keep an eye on things. And that's when she saw it. 3 more ATM withdrawals, each one draining more and more from her account. A total of $960 was gone. Her heart started to race. She frantically clicked into details, double checking the timestamps. The withdrawals happened after she had already left the ATM. The helpful man wasn't just another customer, he was a scammer. Pamela immediately called Chase to report the fraud. She explained everything: the broken ATM card slot, the stranger's advice, the suspicious withdrawals that followed. She expected concern, she expected help instead of what she got, which was denial. They said, "We reviewed your claim, and unfortunately, since the transaction was completed using your card and PIN, it's considered authorized." She thought, wait, what? Pamela was stunned. She didn't authorize those withdrawals. She had already walked away from the machine when it happened. Now Pamela wasn't just fighting the scammer, she was fighting her own bank. Now Chase may have closed her case, but Pamela wasn't backing down. She filed several more fraud claims. Each time the answer was the same: "We're sorry, but the transactions were authorized." Now she was exhausted, but she refused to give up. She kept pushing, calling Chase again and again, refusing to accept their canned responses. And then finally, after multiple escalations and relentless pressure, Chase reversed their decision and refunded her money. She got the $960 back in her account. Now, it turns out this isn't just a Chase problem. I found a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau complaint from a few weeks ago about a Wells Fargo customer who was scammed out of $1,000 in almost the same way. It was a busy afternoon at a Wells Fargo branch in Pennsylvania. The bank was unusually crowded, and a group of people lingered near the entrance. Now, since the CFPB complaints are confidential, we'll call him Tim, just an ordinary guy trying to run a quick errand. He made his way to the ATM outside, ready to deposit a check using the tap to pay debit card. But again, something wasn't right. The ATM wouldn't accept the deposit. Maybe it was full. Maybe it was malfunctioning. Frustrated but in a hurry, Tim walked away from the machine and went inside the bank to complete the deposit at the counter. He didn't realize it yet, but he had just made a huge mistake. Now inside, he stood in line waiting for his turn. A nagging feeling stuck with him. There were too many people around, and one person in particular seemed to be watching him closely. He was saying, was it paranoia or was it something actually off? A few minutes passed. The check was successfully deposited. It wasn't until he glanced at his phone 20 to 30 minutes later that he noticed the email notification from Wells Fargo. $1,000 had just been withdrawn from his account. He was thinking, how was this possible? He hadn't taken out any cash. His mind raced back to the ATM outside. Had he forgotten to close out his session? Then it clicked. Someone had been waiting for him to leave that ATM. A scammer must have jumped onto the ATM the moment he walked away, taking advantage of his still active session. With a few quick taps, they had drained $1,000 before disappearing into the crowd. Now, with his heart pounding, Tim immediately called into Wells Fargo to report the fraud. The bank's response was fast, but not in the way he expected. They said, "Your case has been closed. We determined that the withdrawal was authorized." Authorized? How could it be authorized? He hadn't touched the ATM after his failed deposit attempt. Now Tim was desperate. He called again, pleading for a real investigation. And the response was the same. Wells Fargo refused to refund the money. Instead, he was told to consider the case closed. But for Tim, the fight isn't over since he filed a complaint with the CFPB. But for now, he's left with an empty account. And I gotta say, we have a new administration in office who's trying to gut and eliminate federal agencies.
Oversight fundamentally flawed.
Arguably the most unaccountable agency in the history of the U.S. federal government.
It might be harder than ever for people like Tim to hold these banks accountable by using the CFPB. Now, I call this scam the super glue scam, and it's super simple and shockingly effective. Because by the time you crank up your car, the scammer is already long gone with your money. Here's exactly how they pull it off. First, scammers target an ATM in a busy area, one where people don't linger for too long. They block the ATM card slot by filling it with super glue or some other adhesive, making it impossible to insert your card. This forces customers into plan B, which is using tap to pay. At this point, you might just assume the ATM is malfunctioning, but in reality, it's working just fine. The scammer just made sure you have no choice but to use tap features. Then there's the helpful stranger act. Here's where social engineering comes into play. A scammer posing as just another customer is conveniently nearby. They act friendly, casual, but not pushy, just helpful enough to seem trustworthy and not raise suspicion. That's when they suggest to tap your card instead of inserting it, knowing that most people don't question the advice from someone who seems like they're trying to help. And this is really psychology at work. If someone appears knowledgeable and confident, we tend to follow their lead, even in situations where we'd normally be cautious. Once you tap your card, the transaction seems to go through just fine. You withdraw your money, thank the stranger, and then walk away feeling relieved that your problem was solved. But what you don't realize is that your session is still open. And that's where the real danger begins. Now, the moment you leave the ATM, the scammer moves into place. Here's what they already have: your PIN number. They either saw you enter it in person, or worse, they planted a hidden camera nearby to record it. Then they have an active ATM session. The machine never actually asked you to reinsert your card, so as far as the system is concerned, your session is still open. And they also have an easy way to empty your account. With just a few steps, a scammer selects yes to make another transaction, this time withdrawing as much money as the ATM will allow. By the time you realize what happened, they've already drained your account. And you should know every bank has slightly different rules, but most follow a general structure when it comes to ATM withdrawal limits. It's usually $3,000 at ATMs located inside a bank lobby, or those accessible after hours, including ATMs inside a branch, but available 24/7, and then $500 at non-network ATMs. Now, even though scammers can't usually drain your entire account in one go, losing $500 to $1,000 in minutes would ruin just about anyone's day. That's rent money. And a car payment or a week's worth of groceries wiped out in seconds. And I'd say for most people, discovering fraudulent ATM withdrawals would trigger a straightforward process. Report the fraud, get your money back, case closed. But for the victims of the super glue scam, that wasn't the case at all. Instead of support and protection, they got denials, accusations, and frustration. One victim even reported that a Chase representative outright insulted them, suggesting that they may have been the one that stole the money themselves.
Oh, how do we know you didn't steal it? Why would I steal my own money?
And this isn't just like a denial, it's a slap in the face. So Chase and other banks claim they weren't responsible for these fraudulent withdrawals. But why? Well, they say that the withdrawal happened under the victim's ATM sessions. The scam works by keeping the session open, so as far as the bank system is concerned, the same user was making multiple withdrawals. And banks treat PIN entry as proof of authorization. So since the victim entered their PIN initially, Chase assumed every transaction after that was legit. So in Chase's eyes, there's no fraud at all, just customers changing their minds and taking out more cash. But here's the issue. They refused to check the security footage. They ignored multiple reports from different victims, all at the same ATM. They automatically denied claims without properly investigating. So instead of protecting their customers, Chase's first instinct was to protect their bottom line. So let's talk about how to protect yourself from this ATM scam. Scammers are getting smarter and banks aren't always quick to help. That means your best defense is you. If you don't want to end up in a battle with your bank over stolen money, you need to stay one step ahead of the scam. Now, here's how to avoid getting caught in the super glue trap. You want to avoid using any ATM if the card slot is jammed or broken. If your card won't slide in, do not proceed with the transaction. And any malfunction with an ATM should be treated as a potential tampering attempt. You want to find another ATM, preferably inside the bank or another secure location. In this instance, scammers are really counting on you to take the easy way out, to assume it's just a minor issue and then switch over to tap to pay. And then you always want to close out of your session completely. When the ATM asks, would you like to do something else? Select no. Then you want to wait until the screen returns back to the main menu. Don't just assume the session ended. And also you want to double check your transaction history after using an ATM. If something looks off, call your bank immediately. I hate that I have to say this, but you want to be wary of strangers at the ATMs. If you ever notice someone just standing around or near an ATM, not using it, just kind of hovering, it's not normal. If someone is loitering near the ATM, they could be waiting to trick or target someone. And don't take ATM advice from strangers. If someone is quick to offer a solution, you want to be suspicious. And you definitely don't let anyone physically touch you and your debit card and tap it for you. That should go without saying, but scammers rely on catching people off guard like this. That's actually what happened to one victim, by the way. Now, if you did become a victim of this ATM glue scam, time is everything when dealing with this fraud. The longer you wait, the harder it gets to recover your money. Step 1, you want to check your account for unauthorized transactions. So log into your bank's mobile app or website and check your transaction history. Take screenshots of any fraudulent transactions. These are going to be critical evidence when you're filing disputes. You also want to note the time and location of the unauthorized withdrawals. Then 2, you want to contact your bank immediately. And here's what you want to say when you call. You want to report the fraudulent withdrawals and insist that your ATM session was hijacked. Then you want to request that the bank freeze your debit card immediately to prevent further withdrawals. Then you want to ask for a fraud claim number and write down the rep's name. And also you want to request a review of the ATM security footage. This can be crucial evidence proving that you weren't at the machine for those extra withdrawals. And I also go a little further and demand a written confirmation that your fraud claim is being investigated. And unfortunately, most victims of this super glue scam were denied refunds at first. Now, if this happens to you, just don't take no for an answer. So for step 3, request a written explanation of the denial if you get denied. Banks are legally required to conduct a reasonable fraud investigation. If they deny your claim, demand a written explanation for it. These banks have to provide clear documentation explaining why they believe the transaction was authorized. Now, I believe that many banks are automatically denying fraud claims as a first response, hoping that you'll give up and then move on. So a written response forces them to justify their reasoning, which may expose flaws in their investigation. And step 4, you want to file a police report. A police report creates an official fraud case, adding credibility to your claim. Some banks even require a police report before reopening a denied fraud case. So if the scammer has targeted multiple victims at the same ATM, your report may help law enforcement build a case. And when you talk to the police, you want to report the ATM location, the date, the time, and the fraudulent withdrawals. Also mention any suspicious individuals or helpful strangers you remember near the ATM. And you want to send them screenshots of your bank transactions and your denied fraud claim. Moving on to step 5, you want to contact your state banking regulator. So just so you know, banks are regulated by state financial institutions, and every state has a complaint process. So you want to find your state's banking authority, then submit a formal fraud complaint detailing your whole case and your bank's refusal to help. You'll attach those screenshots and transactions and all the other fraud claims in the police report too. And this works because banks hate dealing with government regulators. If your bank ignored your case, a state inquiry may force them to take action. Now for step 6, file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB. The CFPB is a federal watchdog that oversees banks and investigates consumer fraud complaints. You can do this whole process online too, by the way. Now, a really cool part about the CFPB is that it requires the bank to respond within 15 days. And banks don't want regulators digging into their fraud handling policies. This could pressure them into reversing their decision. If your bank still refuses to help you, it's time to go public with it. Step 7, you want to expose the scam and make noise. You know, many victims only got their money back after news outlets investigated Chase's fraud denials. What you can do is Google your city name plus news on your side to find consumer advocacy reporters. A lot of these local news stations have a fraud or scam alert division that investigate cases like yours. And the media loves fraud cases where banks refuse to help customers. They may pressure your bank into reversing that decision. And listen, banks absolutely hate bad press. A single viral story can force them into refunding dozens of victims. And other victims may have come forward, proving this is a larger issue too. Just like in these cases from earlier, many banks miraculously review the denied fraud claims after media outlets contact them. But you know, I wish I could say this was the only scam you need to watch out for. Unfortunately, that's just not true. Scammers are out here working overtime, coming up with new ways to drain people's bank accounts every single month. That's exactly why I put a whole playlist together for you with all the biggest bank scams you need to know about. We're talking sneaky phone scams, shady credit card tricks, and even scams that banks don't want to warn you about. So don't wait until it's too late. Click on the playlist right here to stay one step ahead of the scammers. Thank you for watching.